Hello and welcome back to the Audible Finish, where we discuss the week gone by in the world of wrestling. I am your host, Dimitri Kalos, and alongside me, as always, is my esteemed co-host, Thanasi. Hello, Thanasi.
Salutations and peace. Thanks for having me on the show again.
We have a jam-packed episode to get through today, with us giving our thoughts on AEW Revolution 2024, which had Sting's last ever match, before also sharing our opinion on the latest news, and that is the Rainmaker, Kazuchika Okada, officially becoming All Elite. On the WWE side of things, we will discuss The Rock's tag team match challenge to Cody Rhodes and Seth Rollins, with the pair seemingly likely to accept the offer this coming Smackdown. So lots is going down there. We'll break down our thoughts on that and more very soon. We'll finish this week's episode with our ranking of WrestleManias 1 to 10, a series of manias that neither I nor Thanasi were actually alive for, so that should prove very interesting for us in terms of trying to rank these all. If you are enjoying the podcast and have a moment, please like, share, and subscribe. And if there is a certain topic that interests you more than the other, please feel free to jump to it using the timestamps in the description below. On that note, let's get straight into AEW Revolution 2024. And to start off with, I'm just going to do a very quick recap of the results. So, Christian Cage beat Daniel Garcia to retain the AEW TNT Championship. Eddie Kingston beat Bryan Danielson to retain the Continental Crown Championship. Wardlow won the All-Star Scramble match to receive a future AEW World Championship match. Roderick Strong dethroned Orange Cassidy to become the new AEW International Champion. The Blackpool Combat Club beat FTR. Timeless Tony Storm retained her AEW Women's World Championship against Deonna Purrazzo. Will Ospreay won against Konosuke Takeshita. Samoa Joe successfully defended against Adam Page and Swerve Strickland his AEW World Championship. And in the main event, Sting and Darby Allin were victorious over the Young Bucks to retain the AEW World Tag Team Championships, which is obviously Sting's retirement match. And those titles have now been vacated and will be awarded in a tournament. Thanasi, lots of matches happened on this card. In general, I thought this was a really good pay-per-view and actually one of my favorite AEW pay-per-views. What did you think generally before we break down a couple of our highlights?
Oh, it was quite strong, and they gave. I think it's important to note that all the matches were somewhere between 12 and maybe 22 minutes. So there were no sort of like pee break sort of throwaway matches. Everything was given at least an appropriate amount of time to shine. And that's what happens when you give your wrestlers a good time to shine, you book it properly, you can produce a very nice card.
The first match on the card that really grabbed my attention properly was Eddie Kingston versus Bryan Danielson. So, and I just wanted to give them a quick shout out because it was by no means the marquee match going in, but I felt like those two really did put on a great showing. And very nice harkening back to ROH old days with the actual handshake stipulation. And Bryan Danielson acquiesced to it. He did follow through. So that was quite nice. Any thoughts you have on that match?
Oh, well, look, what I loved the best about it was the presentation because it was as soon as the TNT title match finished, no nonsense. We actually managed to get out into this one, and we saw Bryan Danielson playing an aggressive face, right? So he wasn't all the way heel, which is kind of like what the build up was looking like. But they had the good storytelling there because Eddie Kingston's hand or his arm is what Bryan Danielson was attacking because that was what he was going to have to shake in the end, and he wanted to avoid that at all. So really, really nice psychological storytelling here.
Look, there were other matches here that were great. Notably, Kyle O'Reilly made his return after the Roddy Strong match after 2 years. I'm really glad to see him back, and I wish him the best in this next stint of his in wrestling. Thanos, is there anything you wanted to comment on Kyle O'Reilly before I move on?
I'm intrigued to see how he's going to interact with the Undisputed Kingdom moving forward because he refused to join, but
Mm.
not aggressively. He didn't go on the front foot. He hugged Roddy Strong, but declined, I think is actually the better way. He didn't refuse, he declined to join the Undisputed Kingdom.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm very interested to see where that's going to lead in the future. But I did want to discuss the other match for me. the after Eddie Kingston, Bryan Danielson, and Rudy stood out was Will Ospreay versus Konosuke Takeshita. I thought, look, we sort of rinsed the booking of the lead up for this match, but there's no denying the quality was up there. There were a couple moments though that I got a bit squeamish. I think was it a brain buster onto the top turnbuckle that Will Ospreay looked like he landed badly. I think he clearly is okay, but that one looked bad. Aside from that, even when he did the Tiger Driver 91, this time it wasn't as bad as say when he did it to Kenny Omega, Forbidden Door. Felt like it was a bit safer, but like I'm nitpicking. The quality of the match here alone was spectacular and a really good showing for Will Ospreay now as he is a fully fledged member of the AEW roster. What was your take on this match?
This match was definitely the strongest one on the card, and it was just an absolute showcase of wrestling. And they had the crowd captivated, especially in like the dying stretch. There were a couple of near falls that we thought towards the end, but that tension was maintained all the way through. And even at the end, I actually thought that Takeshita would turn on Will Ospreay when they both got on their knees in a sign of respect to each other. I thought there was going to be a low blow coming out of that. But no, we kept it at a pretty high pace. Didn't have that drop in morale for the audience. So overall, this was match of the night.
I completely agree, by the way. I think this was my favorite match of the night. And for me, it's an early contender on our list of 2024 matches of the year, I think. After that, we had the three-way for the AEW World Championship. Before I give any thoughts, Nancy, what was your take on this match? What did you think of it?
So the storytelling here was quite intentional, and it was basically Hangman Adam Page refusing to let Swerve Strickland become champion. And it was kind of like that situation, reminiscent of 2002 going into the Elimination Chamber, where Shawn Michaels vowed that whatever it takes, he's going to make sure Triple H does not emerge from the Elimination Chamber at Survivor Series as the world champion. And he would love to be world champion himself, but his number one priority is don't let Triple H do it. And I got a lot of those vibes here from Adam Page holding Swerve Strickland back from becoming world champion because it got so close. And it got to the point where he was just attacking referees left, right, and center, breaking the rules in a no DQ match because it's a three-way. So Samoa Joe did look strong coming out of it as the world champion, which I think is really good because we feared, or I feared, he would just be a transitional champion. I thought Swerve was going to get it here. And as a booking decision, I actually agree with the right call to postpone it because it allowed all the focus to be on Sting and Darby Allin. So when Swerve does become world champion, he should do it in the main event of a pay-per-view.
Exactly right. And I think also it was the you can see now, especially with what happened on Dynamite, it feels like the focus is transitioning to Joe and Swerve. So now they can actually really just focus on those two, which I think would be better for Swerve. When Swerve does eventually win, it would be good for all the folks to be there. And I've already said, I actually would be in favor of Hangman Adam Page having the world title when Swerve wins it. Because I just think after that match as well, especially, it would be perfect for Swerve to finally get that rub off of Adam Page, the one man who cares the most in the world in stopping Swerve from winning the world title. So I think I'm actually like having seen that I'm on board for Adam Page to have another reign. So, but like we'll see what happens. I'm very intrigued. But after that, you alluded to it. We had the main event, and that was Sting and Darby Allin versus the Young Bucks. What did you think of the presentation of this match before it even started, and then also the actual contest itself? What were your thoughts?
It was the best case that we could get, right? Ideally, yes, we would have had video footage across all of Sting's career, but because WWE owns the library for WWE, WCW, like the Jim Crockett days, and even some of TNA days as well, that it created this issue where they had to resort to stills or to Japanese footage when Sting was working there. However, it did have that really big sort of big match feel or a big fight vibe going into it. And I think that was the right way to go about it. The match was quite you could tell it was quite choreographed in that there wasn't a lot of free balling. They knew the phases. It was, let's get the glass pane out there. We know the spot. We're gonna have Sting's boys dressed up as two other iterations of Sting, is the Surfer Sting style and the Wolfpack Sting. So, and then we headed towards the end where he was just no selling against the Bucks,
Yeah.
who even did made a reference, of course, or some intertextuality to Ric Flair's retirement, saying, "We're not sorry, we hate you," before delivering a double super kick, which he no sold as well. So really showing that sort of now, if there's anyone that we're gonna have no selling by Sting to, the Young Bucks in this stage of their career would be acceptable, right? They can cop that. But an absolutely perfect send off, I think, for the Stinger. You couldn't really have done it much better than this.
I want to quickly add as well, we're talking about the Young Bucks. Have you gotten a sense of their imitating, like in a playful and respectful way, but imitating Cody Rhodes with this EVP gimmick? Because they're now ascending in the in at the rampway, the elevator, the Cody Vader, as was popularized during his time. So do you think that there is a thing there where like not in a they're trying to have a dig at him or anything, but that they are sort of adding that element into that character now?
Well, I hadn't noticed that they had the elevator from the the raising of the platform, but if that is the case, then there probably is a little bit of a reference to that, to be honest. A nice detail, but they're leaning quite heavily into this EVP gimmick, I must say.
Yeah. To be honest, I actually don't mind it. I think that there are times when it is a bit goofy, but all in all, I really don't have a problem with it. And I feel like we need to dwell on it because it was very big spot in the match, and a lot of people have talked about it. The Darby Allin dive onto the glass pane. Now, I'll be honest, the imagery after the fact, like I was already very queasy when he just did it, but then seeing the damage afterwards, I'm very concerned. And especially this is a guy who he said it on Dynamite. He's going to try climb Mount Everest in a couple weeks, and he's doing this beforehand. I'm a bit scared for him. Like really, am I the only one? Did you also have that sort of reaction when he did the dive?
When I saw the lacerations after and the just like the spread out blood dripped all over his back, all you can think is just good Lord. And
Yeah.
when he says, "I got to get out of," like in the post match promo, he said, "I've got to get out of here, go to the hospital." The first thing that Sting said was, "Text me when you get there to see, how things are going." And I think he probably should have texted a great deal of the audience because everyone was concerned for the poor bloke.
No, but look, aside from that, I think they handled things as about as well as they could. Ric Flair getting involved. Look, we all have love for Ric Flair, but the guy is moving slower than a caterpillar these days. I think he needs to start, like perhaps not getting involved in the ring. But yeah, all in all, I think it was a really good send off. And now let's see what this world tag title tournament will bring. But keeping on AEW, I want to quickly raise this very big moment on Dynamite. This also had the Young Bucks related. They announced that Adam Page is suspended, and then they announced that Kenny Omega has been fired from the Elite. And then it is announced that, well, not announced, we see the surprise of Kazuchika Okada that he's all Elite, but he is also now just Elite. He's joined the faction with Matthew and Nicholas Jackson. That's it. What was your take on everything that happened with this Okada reveal?
It would have been completely sufficient for us to see um, Kazuchika Okada come out, deliver a Rainmaker to the Young Bucks or a Tombstone, whatever, and then we'd get that massive pop. But the fact that we got him in a heel turn, I thought was definitely a swerve because when you have someone coming in with such hype, you probably do want to give them a bit of a babyface run. And having the insertion of Will Ospreay as part of a heel faction now makes you wonder, like, the Will Ospreay babyface thing is probably going to be coming a lot sooner than we thought.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And the Okada heel run is going to come out of nowhere. How he's going to interact with the Young Bucks actually might be really good for him as far as a microphone outlet, right? Because he doesn't have to cut promos in English. He can rely on them for it
Yeah.
and just have absolute bangers in the ring. So it could be like a really, really clever way to present the character. But Rainmaker, just it, you never would have thought about it, but it pairs up quite nicely with this EVP gimmick.
And I'll tell you something else. I think that this may have been a deliberate plan to lead into the next bout in the Okada Omega series. I think once Omega is fit again and can come back, I think they've set it up from now already so that Okada will be the heel going into that match. Omega will be the face. And I have a suspicion. I'm not going to lie, I wasn't someone that watched New Japan in the days when those guys were reigning supreme. So to me, that would be an interesting match to have. Just like, uh, as an example, Brian Danielson confronted Will Ospreay at the end of this week's Dynamite. I would love to see that match because that isn't like I haven't seen so much of Ospreay that I know exactly what he's about. So to actually see these matches happen, and this is what I like about them bringing in some of the big boys now from New Japan that are happy to come and make that transition to actually see them ingrained into the American system, which is what a lot of fans like us are just more in tune with. So I'm very excited with what Okada is going to do and what Ospreay is going to do. I think this is a very um, a good period for AEW to perhaps launch a bit of a counter attack on what WWE is doing, just to sort of say we're still here, we're still involved, and we've still got things going on.
Agreed. And I think really that with this Dynasty pay-per-view, they can really start to kind of pull back some of the momentum onto themselves following WrestleMania and try to turn it around very quickly. I think the announcement of doing it on the 21st of April is a bit soon after WrestleMania, but potentially you could really chop off that momentum heading into Backlash and bring that focus back onto into Jacksonville.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's move on to WWE officially now in this week's episode. And to start off with, I want to talk about what happened on Smackdown with The Rock and Roman Reigns. Now, The Rock responded to Cody's challenge, basically saying, I will not wrestle you one-on-one. But he created an alternative suggestion, which was a tag match of The Rock and Roman Reigns versus Cody Rhodes and Seth Rollins. And it's got the stipulation of if Cody wins, then I think the Bloodline is barred from ringside. They can't get involved in their match. But if the Bloodline wins, then that turns into a Bloodline rules match. Thanos, what did you think of this segment? But obviously it was a very long segment, so I don't want to dwell too much on the fact that they're really taking their time. But the actual result of the segment, which is this challenge, what do you think of this, and how do you think it adds to the story?
For me, it fell a little bit flat because we were expecting this to happen. We'd heard through the rumor mills that it was going to be a tag match main eventing night one. And I think having The Rock in another main event, having Roman in another main event, for me, I don't actually agree with this, right? I don't think this is the best idea. But because it didn't come as a surprise, it was kind of like, okay, fine, whatever. I thought that the whole Cody versus Rock was a bit more fresh or a bit more left field or unexpected. And they just retconned that and said, no, we're going to do a tag match. The Rock in his heel phase, calling everyone crackheads, and he like they weren't in Phoenix, but he made a big point about Phoenix, 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 like kind of like he had a joke ready and he set himself up to make the joke. It wasn't sort of building off the crowd. So I guess, I don't know, maybe the shine for me of The Rock has kind of gone a bit more dull.
What did you think of Roman Reigns asking The Rock to acknowledge him after he issued the challenge?
I thought that was the most interesting part.
Mm.
And God, I hope that Cody still wins clean on night two and there's no some kind of shenanigans where The Rock is the reason that Cody retains. I don't want that. I want Cody to go in as the new face of the company with a clean victory and putting an end to to this godforsaken reign.
I think what the best case scenario in the event that The Rock interferes is that he neutralizes the outside threats, not in ring. So he doesn't do what he did at WrestleMania 27, where he rock bottoms Cena in the middle of the ring, and then Miz just makes the cover. But rather, he just gets rid of the external threats if that is in the case, and then lets Cody do the rest of the work in the ring, like you
I think
said.
that would be ideal. And he can neutralize the soon-to-be Hall of Famer, Paul Heyman, as well.
Which we will get onto in a sec, but briefly, I just want to talk about Cody and Seth's segment on Raw. They basically said, look, it's not confirmed, but they've essentially said, yep, we're going to do it. They said they're going to show up on SmackDown, and I mean, why else would they show up on SmackDown? Uh, I wanted to quickly address, we've for years harassed Roman Reigns with jokes and gags about his suffering succotash promo. Seth Rollins and his diarrhea Dwayne comment. I'm sorry, that to me is actually worse than suffering succotash. To be honest, for me, it was like you're getting in that territory now where you're making this too goofy. You're going too sports entertainment into this, and just no, keep it serious. And I think Seth Rollins' best work is always when he's serious and not trying to be too much of a clown. So I just wanted to quickly say, Seth, all due respect, maybe keep the diarrhea Dwayne locked away. Is there anything you want to add on that?
Well, they could have just called him Dwayne plain, like just plainly call him Dwayne instead of using The Rock, because then it humanizes him and says, like, yeah, you're just a human like us. And that's how CM Punk used to do it.
Exactly.
So, borrowing from that proven successful formula, it's a missed opportunity.
All right. Well, continuing the bloodline theme, this time we're talking about the wise man, as you mentioned very earlier. I just want, yeah, quick shout out. He has been announced in this year's Hall of Fame, as has Bull Nakano. Uh, and it's going to be in Philadelphia. It feels like it's perfect timing, perfect place, perfect time. Like, I'm really happy for the guy. I think he's proven he's probably one of the greatest wrestling personalities that was never an actual wrestler. He's had such an influence in almost every aspect of the business beyond actually competing in the squared circle. Thanasi, do you have any thoughts on Paul Heyman's induction?
Thoroughly well deserved, and you couldn't find a better location to do it, right? In the heart of Philadelphia, just to be like, you know what, thank you for everything. It doesn't mean anything has to finish, because it's not like a signaling the end of the career. This is just a perfect moment. And I'm predicting from now that CM Punk is going to be the man to induct him into the Hall of Fame. I'm calling it from now.
See, I was actually going to ask you, who do you think is going to induct him? So you think CM Punk? I think it's going to be eventually probably one of the old ECW boys. I can imagine them making a call for a guy like a Tommy Dreamer or a Bubba Ray Dudley, perhaps. But I am very curious who they are going to get to do it. I think CM Punk would be great because I really am on board with this idea of CM Punk being actively involved in WrestleMania 40. Have you? I'm not sure. I don't remember if we discussed it on the show, but have you heard this rumor going around, or like this fantasy booking of Seth versus Drew to have special guest referee CM Punk?
I've seen that on the internet. I don't know if I'm a massive fan of that, because I think actually it would take away from Drew's kudos, because I think he's going to win. Unless, of course, it results in some kind of way of, I guess, maybe Punk getting attacked during the match and he's not the one to actually do the fall, to perform the fall, and then Drew actually gets his moment. But I think that, yes, CM Punk being involved in WrestleMania would be bloody phenomenal. I would love it. But I'm also being conscious of the fact that, given this new opportunity, this twist of fate, if I can put it that way, let's make it real for Drew McIntyre.
I am calling it from now. I think Damian Priest is going to pull off Heist of the Century #2. So I think regardless of whoever wins that match, I think he's cashing in and he's walking out of Mania as the World Heavyweight Champion. But that's assuming that they're actually willing to let him win. I'm
No,
starting to get a bit worried because they've got so many other competitors now that maybe he's been lost in the shuffle, but
I can see it happening night after. I can see him doing Raw after WrestleMania
doing a
cashing.
Ziggler instead.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. All right, well, firstly, let's move on to the next segment of the show, and that is our ranking of WrestleManias 1 to 10. WrestleMania is WWE's biggest and most historic event, but as all fans know, it varies in quality from year to year, and I think there's none more so where that is clear than in the first 10 editions of it. Welcome back to the fourth part of our series ranking WrestleManias on our channel. For any viewers that have not seen our previous videos, I encourage you to do so. Go onto our channel now. In this video, we go back to where it all started, and that is WrestleManias 1 through to 10. This is the decade of manias that truly were of their time, I feel, upon reflection. And they were defined by wrestlers like Hulk Hogan, Roddy Piper, Randy Savage, Ultimate Warrior. Some of these guys, in my opinion, in terms of wrestling work rate, wouldn't have uh, lived up to in today's day and age, but it was a different time. But so for us, we're gonna see what we can look at these manias and see which ones were really good, which ones haven't really stood up to the test of time. As with any ranking, we have to assign some categories, and so we have at the top all time, below that intestinal fortitude, below that so much promise, and finally at the bottom, let's forget about this. Thanasi, I only have one question left, and that is, are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's dive in.
All right, well, let's start with the beginning, and that is WrestleMania 1. This is the first edition of the Showcase of the Immortals. This is what started it all. Obviously, it has historic value for that reason, but if I'm being honest, I'm looking at the card, it is quite meh. Uh, I don't know, like the main event does have star power, and obviously they banked a lot on personalities like Mr. T and I think Cyndi Lauper to get this sort of star quality across. But I don't know. What did you think of this Mania?
I mean, also Muhammad Ali was like a special guest enforcer for the main event or something. So it was very much a sort of wrestling meets celebrities crossover rather than an actual WrestleMania. I think one of the other standout matches on the card was Andre's appearance where he won a body slam challenge against Big John Studd. He even put his own career on the line. He was so confident that he wouldn't get body slammed. But overall, I don't look at this card and say this was about wrestling. I would say this is more about grandeur.
Yeah.
And for me, as a fan of wrestling, that's what disappoints me.
Do you think it fits in the category of so much promise because they were building something, there was something there, but this one was like, it was just a foundation for them to actually build and make it better?
I'll put it to you actually this way. It's more, I don't want to say let's forget about it purely because we've named it that. If we had a different name to the tier four, I probably would say let's put it in tier four. But how can you want to forget the first WrestleMania? You can't.
Okay. Well, then let's put it in so much promise
Yeah.
and move on to WrestleMania 2. This, for anyone that doesn't know, I actually didn't remember this until I was researching it again. This event took place at three different venues in three different cities. So they had four matches at three different cities, arenas. So there's the Nassau Coliseum, Rosemont Horizon, and the Los Angeles Memorial Sports Arena. I actually think, looking on the card, that this was worse than WrestleMania 1.
It was because, see, the thing is, WrestleMania tried the first one, tried to go bigger than life itself. And the consequence of trying to do that even more was let's try to cross three cities. And there was no foundation there. You couldn't handle it. I guess in storyline, there was some interesting points like Randy Savage and George the Animal Steel, who was a very clear admirer of Miss Elizabeth. So there was some story there. You had Mr. T and Roddy Piper having like a worked shoot boxing match, if I can put it that way. They really didn't like each other, but it was a worked boxing match. And I mean, that one was considered the sequel to the previous year's tag match. And then Hogan defended in a steel cage against King Kong Bundy. Like, there's nothing there that I would think of as memorable, to be quite honest with you.
That's exactly my thought, is that this is like the definition of the sequel that didn't live up to the
Yeah,
original. So I think it fits in. Let's forget about this.
agreed.
All right, on to the next Mania, WrestleMania 3. And we're going to evaluate this. I think this is the Mania that really made it something. I think this is the first time that they really it felt like they found a formula, or they found the thing that's going to work. They had obviously the marquee match with Hogan versus Andre the Giant. Now that one is by no stretch of the imagination a great wrestling match.
I think Meltzer gave it -4. It was in the negs.
Well, there you go. That's all you need to know. But I think what it had that is undeniable is it was the first, I think, really big WrestleMania moment. And it's for those any eagle-eyed viewers, I think that is still the first image they show in the opening like title card of WWE when they do the then now forever together thing. The body slam that Hulk Hogan did on Andre the Giant. But there is, to save this Mania as well, an actual classic with Ricky the Dragon Steamboat versus Randy Savage for the Intercontinental Championship. This was a match that they famously, I think, meticulously just like wrote down and got up to a T exactly how it was going to go. And it's a match that I think even today does like stand out. It does feel like it hasn't aged. What do you think of this WrestleMania?
I actually agree with you. And those are the two matches that I would look to. You see, one of those is the wrestling match, right? And it took 3 years of WrestleMania to actually get a really good wrestling match. It shows you what the golden era was like at the time. And I don't think we would actually get another one like that for a very long time. However, it is, as you say, it's probably the first WrestleMania moment. And I think we go back to that body slam that Hogan hits on Andre. And that's like kind of like where uh the the sacrament of WrestleMania moments began, because we didn't actually, even today, we don't care about WrestleMania matches. We care about WrestleMania moments. So I look back to that one and I say, you know what, that's the one where they pulled it off. It took 3 goes, but this one was the WrestleMania that they wanted, or this is the formula that they wanted to present at the time.
Which category do you think this fits in best?
I'm tempted to put it in top two, and possibly even an all-time.
See, I think by reputation it goes in all time, but I feel like when you look at the card, if it, like keep in mind, there's still 12 matches on this card. So it's not it's like like we're talking about two standouts, one of which is basically just for the moment itself, not the actual match itself. But I am tempted to put it in all time just because what this did for Mania as a pay-per-view.
And I think also, like as we continue now, like we've spoken about one and two candidly, but as we head towards the remainder of this set of 10, we need to be aware that wrestling was different then, or professional
Yeah.
wrestling was different. So we have to think about it as much as we can in the context of the time, because we're ranking just these 10 in and of themselves.
All right. So should we put this in all time?
Let's
For
do
the
it.
yeah. All
Let's
right.
do it.
Well, there you go. The next Mania we have is WrestleMania 4, and this has 16 matches on the card, and this was basically a tournament for the WWE title, or the WWF title as it was called back then. Uh, I'm not gonna lie, I'm looking at it and I feel like I don't think there's much that we're missing. I feel like this is a Mania that, especially off the tail of WrestleMania 3, again, like WrestleMania 1 gave a foundation, WrestleMania 2 didn't live up to it. WrestleMania 3 gave them their first spectacle. I feel like WrestleMania 4 again sort of went back down to earth. What do you think?
Well, I will say this. I don't disagree with you at all, because we got Hogan versus Andre 2 ended in a DQ. Neither of them could progress because obviously Hogan can't lose, and they still wanted to have a go with Savage at the top. But because of Savage defeating Ted DiBiase in the main event, I think there's something here to say that there was a competent wrestler in the main event
For the first
uh,
time, really.
for the first time, really. So I give it a plus in that field, without having Hogan in the main event, because he main evented the first three, didn't for the fourth, and then there would be another long string of him being in the main event again.
I think this potentially, for me, it sits either in the second or third category.
I would probably lean towards the second or the bottom of intestinal
Okay.
fortitude.
Yep. All right. Yep. Let's do that. All right. Next up, we have WrestleMania 5. And this, again, it's another iconic main event. This is the Mega Powers exploding. Hogan beats Randy Savage. But this was like a year-long story, the culmination of a year-long story back then, and it obviously is a legendary feud and rivalry in WWE. So I feel like he does have credit in the bank on that with WrestleMania 5. I'm looking at the rest of the card, and you tell me, is there anything that really screams out to you? Because I feel like the rest of it isn't as great.
There was potential here because I'm looking at things like the Rockers were on this card. Owen
Mm.
Hart was on the card as Blue Blazer, wrestling Mr. Perfect. Rick Rude taking on the Ultimate Warrior in another kind of like marquee level match. So there was a Jake the Snake Roberts against Andre the Giant.
Even
There
the
was
Brainbusters.
Brainbusters.
So like there are good talent here. You are right.
That's right. Like there's talent here. It doesn't make it a memorable one, but there's a lot of people on this card where you go, hey, like that's pretty nice to see that person there. And I think for people like us who are late 90s and early 2000s kids, that looking at it from this particular lens makes it look like there was a lot of promise here. Could have had something really cool.
Which I think is exactly where it fits in best, to be honest.
I agree. I
So much
agree.
promise. Okay, on to WrestleMania 6. Again, another iconic main event. This time it was the Ultimate Warrior versus Hulk Hogan. And this was for the Intercontinental Championship and the WWF Championship. I think this is the first and only time this has been done, definitely at Mania. Is it at all, like, including just ever?
I think it's the first ever singles match winner takes all that had the WWF title then and the IC title.
So it's legendary. Look, to be honest, neither of them are my favorite wrestlers, but I think even at the time, this did have a feeling of. I think this was the first time it felt like a passing of the torch moment for Hulk Hogan.
Indeed, yeah, because he stole the torch back from Randy Savage without ever having put him over in the first place,
Mm.
and here he was forced to put over Warrior. That said, this did lead to everything going to Warrior's head, thinking that he was larger than life itself or bigger than wrestling itself, really. And it was a horrible match. Like you can't look back and say, it was great wrestling because neither of these guys could lead. So it was just kind of like, let's throw in two people that are very charismatic. You look at the rest of the card, Ted DiBiase was there, Jake the Snake Roberts was there, Rick Rude, Jimmy Snuka, Dusty Rhodes was in a
Yeah.
mixed tag match with Randy Savage. He was accompanied by Sapphire, and Savage was in his heel phase with Sensational Sherry. So very similar reactions to WrestleMania 5 is what I was having when I was going through the card.
And I think this was the Mania debut. No, it wasn't. So this is like in the infancy years of Bret Hart as well, with the Hart Foundation with Jim Neidhart. This isn't his first with him. I think they had competed in earlier ones. But you see, I feel like there are guys like him that they probably were still wrestling good matches. I like, not with the same focus on them. But where does this Mania sit with you in a ranking?
For me, it's very, very close to WrestleMania 5 in so much promise.
Yep. Okay. Yeah.
That's how I think of it.
Yeah. I'm with you on that. To be honest, I think that is a fair ranking. Okay. Onwards to WrestleMania 7. This one had in the main event, Hulk Hogan beat Sergeant Slaughter, who at this time was playing an Iraqi sympathizer, and I think he said he was very uncomfortable about that as well at the time, having to play that lean into that story. This had The Undertaker's first ever Mania, where he beat Jimmy Snuka. This also was the Mania that had Randy Savage versus, was it Ric Flair?
It was Randy Savage versus Warrior in the
Warrior
retirement match,
and
the
the
forced
yes,
retirement
sorry,
match.
yes, it was the year before Flair, I think maybe, and but he didn't actually retire, did he?
Well, he lost the match and then got retconned because retirements never work in wrestling. But it took like Like he hit 7 elbow drops on Warrior, pinned him after each one, and it was a 2 count each time. So he just couldn't put him away. And then with the final gorilla splash or whatever he calls it,
Yeah,
Warrior did put him away. And then Sensational Sherry turned on
that's
Macho,
right. Yeah.
and
Oh, yeah.
Elizabeth came in and they finally embraced, they reconciled, saying, okay, like let's leave the past in the past, like
That
true
is
love.
that is the moment I take from WrestleMania 7 actually, and I think that's like it's on that list of iconic Mania visuals and wrestling visuals as well. I think there were kids crying at seeing them back together.
Yeah,
Like
that is true.
so, oh, okay.
I think there's something to the credit here to say that there were two sort of high profile matches, like a
Mm,
main and a semi main, which
yeah,
has not been the case for the last little string of, say, 4, 5, 6 WrestleManias, or even, you look at the undercard, Undertaker versus Snooker, historic match, because I think that was as you said, the first. And then you also got the Rockers on this match against the Barbarian and Haku.
yeah, you got it.
So I
I
feel a
think
little bit better about this one than 5 and 6.
should we put it in intestinal fortitude?
We can put it in intestinal fortitude.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's go for it. I think Miss Elizabeth is giving us a good vibe. And I'm not gonna lie, I've never been able to say that name without thinking of Mr. Gibbs from Pirates of the Caribbean.
Mr.
Going for
Gibbs.
Miss Elizabeth.
Uh,
Okay, the next Mania we've got is WrestleMania 8, and this is the one with Flair and Randy Savage, but not in the main event. In the main event, instead, we had Hulk Hogan versus Sid Justice. Why do they not have Randy Savage and Flair main event, especially since it was for the WWF Championship?
the reason for this, I can tell you, is because they couldn't agree who would go over. Eventually, they did go head to head in like in the South in WCW days, a couple years after this, but they couldn't figure out who was going to go over. Flair agreed that he would put Macho over, so they had the storyline of "She was mine before she was ever yours" with the doctored photographs. It wasn't real, or at least that was the case in kayfabe. And then Hogan went head to head with Sid, because of course Hogan has to have the main event. Well, what else would you do? You look at the undercard though. Bret Hart versus Roddy Piper for the IC title. That was nice.
Shawn
And
Michaels
Undertaker
is
versus Jake the
singles,
Snake.
and so sorry, yeah, Undertaker versus Jake the Snake, and I think this is Shawn Michaels' singles debut Mania match
You might be right, actually. Yeah.
with Tito Santana. So
Yeah.
this is actually a Mania that even Owen Hart had a singles match against a guy called Skinner. I'm assuming he's not a principal, but
Skinner.
this actually looks like it was decent. I'm not going to pretend like I read WrestleMania 8's in my memory bank, but I mean, it looks pretty good.
My leaning is towards intestinal fortitude for this one.
Yeah, I think that's a fair ranking. Okay, on to WrestleMania 9. Now, I don't know about you, Thanasi. I feel like this one I do recall as having a very bad reputation.
And rightly so, because I said before, Hogan got shoehorned into the main event of WrestleMania 8 because, of course, he did, even though it wasn't for the world title. And this time, same thing was happening. We were supposed to be in like that sort of new generation passing of the torch after WrestleMania 8. Hogan was supposed to go away, go do his movies and have this big babyface moment of Bret Hart becoming the world heavyweight champion, beginning his reign. And what happens? He cops the salt to the eyes, gets pinned 1, 2, 3 on the mat, and then encourages a washed up Hulk Hogan, if I can be a little bit harsh, to come in, take on Yokozuna in an impromptu match, and then win the strap. Vegas does some weird shit.
I tell you what, that to me, it screams of what Cody Rhodes was being asked to do with The Rock. Just be like, yes, come in, take the spot. Yes, go for it, champ.
Exactly.
Like, and
Exactly.
I'm with you. I'm totally not on board with it. This also had, in my opinion, the worst Undertaker match with he wrestled Giant Gonzalez. This is actually something I've seen on like more than one occasion,
Oh,
and it's terrible. Like it
it,
truly is woeful.
it ends in a DQ. It is the only Undertaker WrestleMania match to end in a disqualification because the bloke tried to use chloroform to put the Undertaker out of consciousness and then pin him.
Oh my God. To be honest, I'm tempted to just put this in. Let's forget about this.
I am 100% in agreement with you.
Beautiful. All right, let's truly try and forget about this and move on to WrestleMania 10. And this one is I just sort of think of this as the Bret Hart Mania. Like he opens the show with a match against Owen Hart that he loses, but I think those two put on a fantastic showing. I
Classic.
think anytime they really paired up against each other, it was magic in the ring. That's certainly what the reputation says. And then he closes the show. Keep in mind, he lost the opener, and then he has to come in at the end to face Yokozuna. And he actually beats him for the WWF Championship. And there's that excellent icon, not like that icon type of image with Razor Ramon and Lex Luger carrying Bret Hart on their shoulders, and it's just such a beautiful
He
image.
has the endorsement of the locker room
Yeah,
after he wrestled two times. And Yoko actually wrestled two times as well, but he won the
yeah, he
first
did.
one against Lex because this was the two winner Royal Rumble, and they had the coin toss on who would wrestle first, and they would both have to wrestle two matches on the card 100%. And this was the way that the cookie crumbled, and we had him putting over his little brother on the opener in the opener.
And the other match as well, I can't believe it took me this long to bring it up, but Razor Ramon versus Shawn Michaels in a ladder match for the undisputed WWF Intercontinental Championship. This is still to this day a fantastic ladder match. These guys pulled it off fantastically, and I Shawn Michaels, I think, really he was birthed that day, just like this crowned Bret Hart. I feel like this was also the true beginning of the Shawn Michaels love affair of just spectacular Mania moments
And
and matches.
can I just say that looking on our list, it's always brilliant when you see a marquee world title match, but also a marquee intercontinental championship match, right? Because even like around this sort of new generation, even golden era, it was treated as whoever is the IC champion is your number two guy, right?
Yeah,
These days we kind of have, or before Gunther, we had that sort of separation where the mid card did kind of have a bit of a ceiling, and then you've got your main event level guys that are vying for the world title, but maybe not quite there.
yeah.
And to have this standout five-star match between Razor and HBK on the same card as Bret Hart being crowned, being coronated as kind of like this is the guy that we're going to have for the way forward. It just felt like a real changing of the guard and an ushering in proper of the new generation.
For me, I genuinely think this Mania does have the ability to be put in the all-time category
I
for those
think
reasons.
actually, I think it should easily go into the all-time category.
All right, well, let's start sort of filling in the order within each category.
Yep.
I think WrestleMania 10 might be controversial. I think it's above WrestleMania 3.
I don't think it's controversial at all. I agree with you, and I think that should be the number one spot.
All right, well, beautiful. All right, we're in agreement there. So we have WrestleMania 10 and then WrestleMania 3 in all time.
Agreed. Get me out.
In intestinal fortitude, we have three manias. So we have Mania 4, Mania 7, and Mania 8. Is there any one of those that you feel is better than the other two?
I think when we both spoke about WrestleMania 8, because of the Macho Flair and the Bret Roddy Piper matches, that one kind of stands out as a hey, that's actually pretty good, you know,
Yeah.
like some solid matches. So I think we can put those two higher than the others.
Okay, so we'll put Mania 8 at the top of this intestinal fortitude list.
Yep.
With WrestleMania 7 and WrestleMania 4, do you have an inclination either way?
Well,
Do you
this is
think
what I'm
7 is
thinking.
above 4?
Seven had two marquee matches, which
Hmm.
is a point in its favor, but also it had Hogan in the main event and winning the world title. So these are my personal feelings, of
No,
course.
no, yeah, of course. That's what
Of
we're here
course,
for.
you know, we have Warrior Savage having that special Miss Elizabeth moment. So I guess maybe that's what we remember. But perhaps Savage actually becoming the heavyweight champion of the world outshines that. What do
Look,
you think?
let's give it to Savage. So
Yeah.
we'll put his crowning moment, Mania 4, at 4 in the ranking of these 10 manias, and then we'll put Mania 7 right below that
The
within the intestinal.
reconciliation with his wife.
Yes. So reconciling with his wife is not as good as winning the world title. That's what
I think we could
we've set out.
100% agree with that.
Let us know in the comments if you agree or disagree. All right. Well, after that, we have So Much Promise, Mania 1, Mania 5, and Mania 6. I'm tempted to put Mania 1 above the other two just because of the legacy of it.
Okay, okay, yeah.
Not necessarily because I think it's a better show, but because it did start it. But what do you think?
I don't have a strong disagreement with that. I think that at least 5 and 6, though, that being said, they did have very marquee main events. It
That
was
is
like
true.
two big guys, right? It was Hogan and one of the two kind of alternate franchise players of the era. So I think that that's what kind of pulls those two ahead. But I think of them quite close to each other, to be quite honest. So I don't have very, very strong opinions here. I'm happy to defer to you.
Ah, I'm going to stick to my guns and say Mania 1 above just because it was the first. And
Okay.
also, just I want to say quickly, it feels like it was a missed opportunity to just have Hogan versus Roddy Piper in the
They
opening first Mania. But I
they
understand.
wanted the celebrity. They
I
wanted
th
Mr. T.
I think it's also that Piper he didn't want to give Hogan the win. Like he always wanted to keep that and be like, I'm the ultimate villain. I always get away type
Yeah.
attitude. So I get why it didn't happen. But I don't know. Do you think Mania 5 is above Mania 6 or 6 above Mania 5 for you?
I'll put it this way. Hogan wins in one, Hogan loses in the other. However, Randy Savage is in one and Ultimate Warrior is in the other. So these are very, very close, kind of tossing up here. Where are you leaning?
I'm leaning to potentially 6 above 5. I'm trying to look at the rest of the card and be like, is there anything that's swinging me away? And it is tough. I feel like they're very closely matched, to be perfectly honest.
Maybe I'll put it this way. WrestleMania 5, because the IC title wasn't there, we could have had maybe a bit more potential. Whereas with WrestleMania 6, at least we accept that they put all their eggs in that basket. WrestleMania 6 had
Yeah.
a main event with both of the two titles, the singles titles.
Yeah, okay. So we'll put Mania 6 above Mania 5 in the So Much Promise category. And then we have WrestleMania 2 and WrestleMania 9 in Let's Forget About This. And I have a very simple fix for this. WrestleMania 2 was trying something. It didn't work, but it was trying to be inventive. It was trying to work on the model and try and, figure something out. I can almost commend it for actually going and giving it a go. WrestleMania 9, by this point, they knew what was working and they still created this mess of a show. And I feel like that's why, for me, that stands out as the most egregious. Let's forget about this candidate.
Without giving it any further thought, let's forget about it.
All right, perfect. Well, that's our list. Let us know in the comments below if we got it right or if we've completely stuffed it up. We didn't live this period, so obviously we don't have as much personal information to draw off of. But that being said, we're right and you're wrong. It doesn't matter. No, but in all seriousness, let us know in the comments what you think. Well, Thanase, that brings us to the end of this week's edition of the Audible Finish. Next week, we're going to be looking to the developing storyline, seeing exactly what Cody and Seth reply to the Bloodline, and we'll be seeing as well the results of the AEW Big Business event, which perhaps is going to have someone debut of a certain Cash Persuasion.
Certain bossly character.
Uh, we'll see what happens. Certainly, there's plenty to look forward to on both AEW and WWE. So we'll tune in. Thanasi, great to have your company as always.
Thanks for having me. We'll see everybody next week.
And thank you to everyone for tuning in. Until next time, we hope everything you do is just too sweet.